But of course, the Lakers came from Minneapolis.
Right.
And they moved to LA, and I've been a Laker fan since the early 60s. And I go back all the way to the days when they had, in the 60, 62, 63, 64, when they had Jerry West, and I was a little kid, and Elgin Baylor, and Leroy Ellis, and Darrell Imhoff, and Tommy Hawkins, and Hot Rod Hundley. I remember all these guys, and I've been a fan for, gosh, we're talking close to 50 years now. And it really is sad to see what has happened now to the Lakers. People say, well, what do you mean sad? They have Kobe Bryant. They got Dwight Howard. They got Steve Nash. What more do you want? Well, I know if you're following, the NBA and you know what's going on, the Lakers went 0-8 in the preseason. Granted, Kobe was hurt. Howard's coming off back surgery. Nash is up there in age. And they went 0-8 in the preseason. They lost their first 3 games of the regular season, so they were 0-3. They won the next game, and they lost the next game. So they were 1-4 in the preseason, and 0-8 in the 1-8 in the 1-4 in the regular season, 0-8 in the preseason for a combined 1-12, and they lost 4 straight at the end of last year. So they really had gone, if you stop and think about it, with Mike Brown as their coach, they had gone 1-16. Stop and think about that. In a 17-game stretch, whether it was last season, preseason and this season, the Los Angeles Lakers had won 1 game out of 17. And I guess the management had seen enough, and they said, Mike Brown, you're fired. Now, I know there are people out there that believe that it was too quick of a hook. He got the axe too quickly. Personally, I don't think he did get the axe too quickly. If anything, I think they should have changed coaches before the season began. And nothing against Mike Brown. He's a very likable guy. I thought maybe when they brought him in, hey, maybe he'll finally bring some defense to this team. But when I watched that first game of the season, that opening night when Dallas came into L.A. without Dirk Nowitzki, and literally, they blew the Lakers out on their home court. I was talking on the phone to a friend of mine who's a big Laker fan back in L.A., and after that first game, I said they need to get rid of Mike Brown. They are going to have to bring in a coach. And even then, I was saying Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson, we knew he's out there. He's had his time to recharge his batteries. Now he's been out of the game, and the Lakers are built to win now. Kobe is getting up there in age. He's in his 17th NBA season. They made a huge gamble. Here's Phil and Kobe with one of their, or I guess with a couple of their NBA title trophies there. But they made a huge gamble in going out there and making the trade for Dwight Howard. And I commend the Laker organization for doing that trade, because when you stop and think about it, Dwight Howard has 1 year remaining on his contract. And he flat out told Orlando and the Lakers, if you trade me and I go to the Lakers, I am not going to sign a new deal. I'm going to play it out. And the Lakers knew that, but they took the gamble anyway. They traded Bynum. Now, Bynum only had 1 year remaining on his contract too, but if the Lakers really wanted to keep Bynum, they could have given him a new deal for the next 5 or 6 years, and they could have done that. I think it was a good thing to trade Bynum, because he's too unreliable, he's too fragile, he gets hurt all the time, and even when he's not hurt, you never know when he's going to show up. So I think the Lakers did the right thing in trading Bynum in that package, a 3-way trade, but nevertheless, it was a gamble to bring in a guy who flat out said he would not sign a new contract. So there's a very good likelihood the Lakers have now traded a commodity like Bynum. Dwight Howard comes here for 1 season, and here's Big Dwight, who's a specimen. I mean, the man's a physical specimen. He's like 6'11", 7 foot, and he's built like a Greek god. But nevertheless, he plays out 1 season, and he could fly the coop and be gone. And so the Lakers took that gamble that if Dwight Howard comes to L.A. and he gets a feeling for what L.A. is all about, what the Lakers are all about, with their history of great center play, with Kareem and Shaq and Wilt Chamberlain and George Mikan and down through the years, that Dwight can be the next guy for the next, 7 or 8 years here in LA, and he can be that big center in LA. And also, if they win a title, he won't want to leave. So they took a gamble, and they brought him here, and I give them credit for that. So now it's really is win or bust. And they start off the preseason 0-8. They look terrible in the first game. They look even worse in the second game. The Clippers blow the doors off of them, which, by the way, the Clippers have a great team. It seems like they have every player in the league now is on the Clippers. It's unbelievable what they have now. But anyway, they had to trade Mike Brown because there's two things that are happening here. One, the window for a championship with Kobe on the team is closing quick. And two, you have to keep Dwight Howard past this season. So they made the coaching, they fired Brown. And when they did, I think everybody felt that they must have a deal in place with Phil Jackson or they would not have fired Mike Brown. And they were saying they hadn't contacted Jackson, but everybody knows that Phil Jackson is dating Dr. Buss's daughter, Jeannie Buss. So, how difficult is it to have a phone call to know that he's available or he's interested in the job or he wants the job? There had already even been some leaks that even the day before Mike Brown was fired, that Phil Jackson had actually made phone calls to some of his assistant coaches to see about their availability as far as putting together his staff with the Lakers. So it almost seemed like it was a done deal. Well, you probably know the story. They fired Mike Brown on a Friday. Bernie Bickerstaff, coached the team on an interim basis on that Friday night. And then on Saturday, they met with Phil Jackson. And depending upon who you want to listen to and who you want to believe, and listen, I've always had a few issues with Phil Jackson. I think he's the best coach out there for sure. But whatever my issues with Phil were, never, ever did I accuse the man of not having integrity. I think everybody would agree that Phil Jackson is a man of integrity, okay? And so I choose to believe Phil. Phil made a statement saying that he met with the Lakers on Saturday, and never once was the issue of money brought up. And also, he didn't make any demands regarding travel restrictions, as some of the irresponsible reporting came out that he was asking for travel restrictions and not necessarily go to all the road games. Phil is way too much of a competitor to, even think that, hey, I'm not going to go to all the road games and we're going to compete for a title, okay? And you kind of knew that was kind of bogus. And according to Phil, he was told by Mitch Kupchak and Jim Buss that, think it over and let's talk again on Monday and let's sleep on it and let's talk again on Monday. Give us your answer on Monday. Well, the Lakers did sleep on it. And on Sunday, they decided, that we're going to talk to Mike Dunleavy and we're going to talk to Mike D'Antoni. And Sunday, just after midnight, they called Phil Jackson, woke him up out of bed, and told him that we've hired Mike D'Antoni. So Phil never got, and this is Mike D'Antoni here. And he's a very good coach. He's very well respected. Kobe Bryant likes this guy. Kobe Bryant, I don't want to say idolized him, but he certainly was a big fan of D'Antoni growing up in Italy. D'Antoni was a star in the Italian league. And of course, Kobe's father played with Mike D'Antoni in that league. And so part of Kobe's childhood was growing up in Italy. So he goes all the way back, as a child with Mike D'Antoni. Of course, the Lakers in the offseason brought two-time MVP Steve Nash, to the Lakers. And Nash won those MVPs with Mike D'Antoni with the Phoenix Suns. And he played under Mike D'Antoni for 5 years. And I think it's fair to say that Mike D'Antoni's offensive style and system are largely responsible for Steve Nash winning those MVPs. So you think about it in those terms. And also Dwight Howard has spent time with Mike D'Antoni as far as with the U.S., not only, the U.S. basketball team, whether it was in the World Championships or on the Olympics. Now, of course, Dwight Howard didn't play in the Olympics in 2012 because he had his back surgery. But in 2010, he was with USA Basketball. Mike D'Antoni is an assistant coach with that team. And so Dwight Howard has a relationship with Mike D'Antoni. So from that respect, they can have this, kumbaya atmosphere in the Laker locker room where, Steve Nash, Kobe Bryant, and Dwight Howard can all feel good about Mike D'Antoni. So from that respect, you could say it makes sense. But when you dig deeper, it really is a horrible hire, in my opinion, because, and in many people's opinion, Phil Jackson, of course, has 11 championship rings. He's won 11 championships as a head coach. He also got a championship ring as a player, by the way, with the New York Knicks. And Phil did all the dirty work on that team. He was a rebounder. He was like a Dennis Rodman of his day, that type of player. I'm old enough to remember Phil Jackson as a player, and he was a kind of a roughneck. But nevertheless, Phil Jackson has won more titles than Red Auerbach. Red Auerbach had 10. The legendary, mythical, iconic coach of the Boston Celtics had 10 championship rings as a coach. Phil has eclipsed him now with 11. There's no other coach that's even close, okay? And, of course, Mike D'Antoni has never even had a team make it to the finals, let alone win a championship. Now, in all fairness, the one season it looked like he was going to, Stoudemire got hurt and Robert Horry hip-checked Steve Nash into the bench and broke his nose, when it looked like they were going to, beat the San Antonio Spurs and get to the finals, but, they didn't. So they turned to D'Antoni. And really what it boils down to, again, depending upon who you want to believe, and I'm going with Phil Jackson, and I'm going with sources like Chris Broussard and also Stephen A. Smith. Those guys they're like on the inside, and they do have tremendous sources. And it doesn't take, too much of a rocket scientist to see what's going on here. Dr. Jerry Buss owns the Lakers, and he has now for 33 years. But he's obviously getting up there in age. And so he has now handed over the basketball operations to his son, Jim Buss. And so Jim Buss's title is actually owner in transition. He's the owner in transition, okay? Basically what you have here is you have a silver spoon kid. You have a rich kid that's been handed this toy to manage and to operate and run. Everything Jim Buss has done since he's been in there has been laughable. It was Jim Buss that was absolutely insistent upon Andrew Bynum and keeping Andrew Bynum. After they saw the guy couldn't stay healthy, he was lazy, he kept him. Kobe wanted to trade Bynum years ago. He told him he doesn't have what it takes. He didn't listen to Kobe. He took it as his personal project on Bynum. He stayed with Bynum. Kobe, wanted to trade him for Chris Paul years ago. Okay. So that was kind of in my opinion, a mistake. But here, last year, and this is what really sent up major red flags about Jim Buss. Last year, when the Lakers tried to make a trade, Lamar Odom and Pau Gasol for Chris Paul, it was such a ridiculous deal to give up two, frontline players like that for one, that the league stepped in. The NBA actually stepped in and they negated the trade. They said, no, we're not authorizing this trade. You can't do it, which is almost unprecedented. I'm sure it's happened before, but it's so rare that the league has to step in and actually put the kibosh on a trade. But they felt like they had to do it in this case because it was such a ridiculous deal. Gasol and Odom for Chris Paul, it was ridiculous. And I'm glad that they nixed that deal. The problem is, though, the league nixed it. Chris Paul was very upset. He wanted to sue the league because Chris Paul wanted to come to the Lakers. But on the other side of the deal, there were two Lakers who their feelings were very hurt, and that was Pau Gasol and Lamar Odom. Now, Pau Gasol, he's a European. He's from Spain, and he's probably, let's be honest about it, he's more mature, more mentally and psychologically mature than Lamar Odom, and he recognizes this is just business. And to Pau Gasol's credit, he got over it very quickly. Lamar Odom was really upset, and truthfully, he pouted like a little baby, okay? And he said that, if you don't want me here, then I don't want to be here. And he didn't come to practice. Now, remember, this was before the season even began. It's not like he walked out on a game and didn't show up for a game. He didn't come to a practice in preseason the day after they tried to trade him, okay? So he pouted like a little baby. And he said, if you don't want me here, then just trade me. So without even giving it, literally 24 hours. It was like within 12 hours, Jim Buss said, trade him, give him away. I don't care. Now, you're talking about Lamar Odom. He won this. He had his best year of his career last year, the year before, because we're talking about the beginning of last season. He won the Sixth Man of the Year award, and he almost made the All-Star team. In fact, he probably deserved to be on the All-Star team, but he wasn't a starter. But to almost make the All-Star team when you're a sixth man is unbelievable. He almost did, and he did win the Sixth Man of the Year. And Jim Buss had a little temper tantrum, and it's one thing to trade the guy. Okay, fine. You want to trade him, but you got to get something back for someone of that value. Okay, and he had tremendous value at that time. Lamar Odom's stock has gone way down since then, but at that time, his value was incredible. They got nothing for him. They gave him away. They took a future draft pick for him, a player which is potent. They don't even get a guy back that can help him for that season. Jim Buss had his ego bruised, and he threw a tantrum, and he gave him away. And they said, oh, well, we're clearing cap space. Well, that's ridiculous in itself. Clearing cap space is never a guarantee of anything. Just ask the New York Knicks. The Knicks spent 2 years clearing cap space to get LeBron James. Well, what good did that do you? You never got him. It didn't come. So clearing cap space is a waste of time, okay? And to give away a player before the season begins to clear cap space is ridiculous. That right there told you something about Jim Buss. That was a laughable mistake. Hiring Mike Brown was a huge mistake. Okay, now at the time I thought, well, maybe he'll be good for the Lakers. But the reality is, when you hear the stories that Jim Buss had a meeting and he didn't, with Mike Brown, he liked the way he sounded in the meeting, and then he didn't even stay for the whole meeting. He left halfway through the meeting. And he said, I like the way that guy sounded in the meeting, and they hired Mike Brown. And Mike Brown never got Cleveland over the hump. They did get to the finals with LeBron James, but they never won the whole thing. And I don't want to bash on Mike Brown because he's a good man and he's a pretty good coach. But when you're coaching the LA Lakers, you're talking about, one of the primo, coaching positions in all of sports. Manage the New York Yankees, coach the LA Lakers, the Boston Celtics. These are primo spots. And it really does take, a special kind of a charisma and character and persona to handle that. It's not just X's and O's. And it really turned out that it was not a good hire. But what's really, it's one thing to take chances. That's fine. We can always take chances. But the other side of it, too, is that Jim Buss never even consulted with Kobe Bryant. And I'm sure there's people out there that's saying, why should he? Why should he consult with one of the employees? They own the team. He can hire whoever he wants. Why should he? In pro sports, it doesn't work that way. The athletes are not employees. They are assets. And the value of your franchise is directly relatable to, the assets that you have on that team. And you're talking about a 5-man roster. Kobe Bryant is pivotal to winning a championship. He should have talked to Kobe. He didn't even consult with Kobe. Okay. And Kobe's earned that right. And they just went and hired Mike Brown, and it turned out to be an $18 million mistake because the very next season he fired him 5 games into the season, and he has to pay Mike Brown $14 million to go away. So the Lakers are rich. They can afford it. They just signed a new 20-year, $3 billion TV contract for local television. Local television, $3 billion for 20 years. That's $150 million per season for the next 20 years for local TV. Now, those revenues that's not part of revenue sharing. The other teams don't get that money. Okay, the Lakers get their part of revenue share for national TV, but what each team gets for local TV, that's for the Lakers. Now, because of the soft cap in basketball, the Lakers can't go and just spend it all on contracts because there's a maximum per player. But nevertheless, the Lakers just have to now pay Mike Brown $14 million to walk away because Jim Buss didn't think it through. Didn't consult with anybody, and he thought the guy sounded good in an interview, and he said, we're going to go with him. And at that time, all Jim Buss wanted to do was clear every evidence, every shred of Phil Jackson out of the building. Everybody at that time was saying the right hire for the Lakers at that time when Phil wanted to, go, retire or go on sabbatical or leave the game. He likes to recharge his batteries. Was Brian Shaw was the right guy. Kobe wanted Brian Shaw. Everybody wanted Brian Shaw. But you know what? Jim Buss didn't want any part of anybody that was connected to Phil Shaw to still be in that building. The ball boys, the janitors, that doesn't matter. Everybody who had any connection to Phil Jackson was gotten out of that was cleansed out of the organization. Okay? Now, why does he have this kind of hatred for him? Well, maybe it has something to do with his sister, that Phil Jackson is dating his sister and he's like 20 years older than his sister or 30 years older. And, who knows? Maybe that bothers him. Okay. But when you listen to people like Stephen A. Smith and Chris Broussard, who they have contacts on the inside, they say things like Jim Buss's ego couldn't handle Phil Jackson. It was like his power was immediately reduced when Phil Jackson came into the building. So he didn't like having his power reduced. It was a power trip by nothing more than a spoiled little rich kid whose daddy gave him the team. And what everybody says was that it was Dr. Buss that stepped in and said, we're not going to do this anymore. And it was Dr. Buss that ordered the firing of Mike Brown. But it was Jim Buss now that went with D'Antoni because he didn't want Phil Jackson, and Jim Buss got his father to sign off on it. Why do we have to pay Phil Jackson $20 to $24 million? We can get D'Antoni for 12, or really 12 for 3 years, but we can get D'Antoni for 8. Okay, and so his dad went along with it because it made sense from the standpoint of the players are comfortable with D'Antoni. But the reality is D'Antoni's never coached defense. His teams have never done anything. What he did in New York was a travesty. I was in New York when D'Antoni was the coach of the Knicks. As soon as he got run out of town by Carmelo Anthony, the Knicks went on a winning streak with Mike Woodson, and they rehired Mike Woodson. And right now the Knicks are 5-0, unless they lost tonight. But right now, I mean, what Mike Woodson has done with that team since D'Antoni got run out of there. Now, people say he actually resigned, but he was forced to resign. He was fired, okay? He was run out of there. What they've done, since D'Antoni has been kicked out is evidence enough of what you're going to get with Mike D'Antoni, okay? And so really, basically the whole thing is a joke. In my opinion, Chick Hearn is rolling over in his grave right now, and one of the happiest guys I think that's out there. First of all, I think a lot of the other powerful teams in the West are very happy, like probably Mark Cuban with Dallas, San Antonio, Oklahoma City. They're all thrilled that Phil Jackson, is not the coach of the Lakers. But I think somewhere up in Northern California, where Jerry West is an executive with the Golden State Warriors, I think somewhere up there, Jerry West is smiling. I believe that. And the reason I say that is because it was probably about, I want to say about 10 years ago. We'd have to look it up, maybe 11 years ago. Jerry West, he left the Lakers. He got a $20 million offer to be the general manager of the Memphis Grizzlies. And, of course, Dr. Buss, especially at that time, was not paying his executives $20 million. Jerry West was getting $2 million a season, which was considered a lot. He's not a player anymore. And so Jerry West, who, if anybody out there in the game deserves to get a payday out of basketball, to me, it's Jerry West. Maybe you could say Oscar Robertson too, but nevertheless, I'm happy for Jerry West that he got his payday with Memphis. Okay. But I think another thing that might have played into it for Jerry West is that he saw the handwriting on the wall. Okay. He saw that Dr. Buss has a son. His daughter now works for the organization, and Jeannie has worked for everything she's ever gotten. She's a very intelligent woman. And what goes on with Jeannie has nothing to do with what goes on with Jim. They're two different animals here. But Jerry West probably saw, hey, I'm never going to be on the inside. He's going to hand it over to his son. His son is going to be my boss, who knows nothing about basketball. And Jerry West took the money and ran, and he's probably very lucky that he doesn't have to be involved in all this. And Mitch Kupchak, who was Jerry West's assistant, has been the GM ever since. And now Mitch Kupchak has to come up to the front lines, and he has to, fall on the sword for the team. He has to make it sound like these are his ideas, and Mike D'Antoni's the right guy for the job, and he's the one fronting for Jim Buss, falling on the sword. And I hope that someday Mitch Kupchak is no longer with the organization, and maybe he gets a job in another organization, or he retires or whatever. And I hope he writes a book, okay, about everything that's going on, because Mitch Kupchak is a smart basketball man, and he knows what's been going on behind the scenes. And I hope he writes a tell-all book when he's done with the Lakers. It might be 10 years from now, but at some point, I'd like to hear what really is going on, because the Lakers have become the laughing stock. So I think what Jim Buss is going to learn, this is the final thought on the subject here, is that a sports franchise, it's not like a regular business, like whatever you have a retail business or a service business or whatever. All businesses can be fragile, but a sports franchise is very fragile. The Lakers have been on top now as an upper echelon team. Even when they've had a few little down years, they've been pretty much up since about 1980. So for about 30 years now, they've been one of the elite teams, even when they missed the playoffs a little bit. In the late 70s, the Lakers were horrible. They were out of the playoffs. They couldn't win a game. They were terrible. And that's how they got the first pick and got Magic Johnson, by the way. The Lakers right now, in my opinion, are on the cusp of going into the abyss for the next 10 years because of what just happened this past weekend, last weekend with Phil Jackson. Because if Dwight Howard flees the coop, and he very well could, if he doesn't sign to stay on here for the next 5 years, and it's kind of sad that you have to, sit there and impress a guy to want to come and take your $19 million per year, because that's the max. That's the most you can give the guy is $19 million per year, okay? And you have to sit there and hope that he'll take your money. It's almost a sad commentary on our society, but that's pro sports. If he decides to leave and he goes to Dallas, or he goes to Houston, or he goes to the Brooklyn Nets, or I think Dwight Howard might go to Boston. Garnett's on the end of his career there. Danny Ainge is a very persuasive guy, okay? He could end up in Boston, okay? If Dwight Howard flees the coop, what do you have? Kobe comes back next year for his 18th season. His game is diminished. Let's face it, he's still a stud, but his game is not the same anymore, okay? The Lakers could very easily, with Dwight Howard leaving, Steve Nash is, almost 40 years old now. They don't have any shooters on this team. The Lakers could literally miss the playoffs and fall into the abyss for the next 10 years. Once you fall to the bottom, it's not that easy to get back up on top. And the teams around the NBA are not going to be lining up to help the Lakers, okay? And I think that Jim Buss has basically, is on the verge of ruining what his father has built up for 30 years, what he did here. And you know what? It would serve the Lakers right. And all I have to say on that is, go Heat. All right, that feels good. I feel better now, Ronnie. Okay.